Hi, welcome back to Burning River Bushcraft. Today we're going to be looking at the Feuerstock ferro rod. So a ferro rod is a key component to any survival kit I ever make, be it wilderness or an urban survival kit. So ferrocerium rods have a lot of shortcomings to them, and you just kind of accept it. That's just the nature of the beast. But finally, this Feuerstock ferro rod has addressed some of those key issues. So the first issue is anytime something is that important and that vital to a survival kit, it's got to be pretty important and you really don't want to lose it. And they've addressed that by making this red. So every ferro rod I've ever seen and ever had has always been black. So I just had a fishing kit out not that long ago, and I dropped some of the hooks in there. And some of the hooks were red, some of the hooks were gold, some of the hooks were black in color. And guess which ones I found first? The red ones just leaped right out at me. So the fact that this is a high visibility rod, that means if I leave it at camp or if it rolls out of my pocket when I'm sitting down, I'm going to see it, I'm going to recognize it, and I'm going to be able to find it quickly. So this red color does a couple things for us. It's not just for looks. This is actually a protective coating. So this is a fairly newer ferro rod that I've got. And you see the corrosion on it. This went on one river trip with me, and it was in a dry bag the whole time. So ferro rods corrode pretty darn quickly. I've got a video on my channel on ferro rod maintenance, and I think I was gone. I think I did a 100-mile canoe trip, and my ferro rod was just toast after that. I've been on survival courses, and I've been out for a week at a time in the rain. And that was with a ferro rod and an exposed leather loop on my knife sheath. And the rod was nearly rotted. They go quick, and it's easy to clean this up, but with a coated rod, you don't have to worry about it at all. This thing is impervious to the weather, unlike this one here, which is gonna rot over time. So I like to keep a lanyard on all my ferro rods anyway. So that's not a groundbreaking idea. But the Feuerstock, instead of just having a regular loop, this has actually got a fire cord in it. So I can break this down. I can use this in an emergency situation as just cordage. But this is actually the survival type paracord. I've got a fire ribbon in here. I've got, this looks like a sewing thread as well. So I've got a couple different strands of material plus the standard paracord inner strands. So this may not seem like a lot of cordage, but you're looking at enough cordage to easily build a shelter, enough fire ribbon to easily make a fire, and you can repair your gear or possibly catch a fish on this smaller line. The last thing I'm going to point out is probably my favorite, and that is a striker. So this actually has a rubber cap on it, and this is a carbide striker. So I'm not sure why this hasn't been adopted as an industry standard, but Feuerstock got it right with this. I've had strikers in the past, and I don't use a striker. I use the back of my knife spine 99% of the time. And that's just because I've never had a good striker, to be honest. I've used hacksaw blades that have come with some of the smaller, more inexpensive rods. Some of the strikers almost look like guitar picks. But this is like the real deal. This is like 3 fingers plus. It's got a rubber coating on it, so it's not going to slip in your hand. And this carbide is harder than the rod, so you're going to maintain that 90-degree spine no matter how many times you scrape this. So besides the fact that this is a weather-resistant high-vis coating, and I've got a survival-style paracord with a fire ribbon inside it, this carbide striker is the deal breaker with me. This works on any rod, so look at the sparks on this thing. This is freaking ridiculous. So you've got to understand the importance of this. A ferro rod in the woods is really, really hard to use. You have to find a hard rock, a broken piece of glass to get it to work properly. Most knives do not come with a 90-degree spine. They're starting to come around. This one is okay, but this knife spine is not quite as hard as it should be. So as I use it, I start to wear, so I have to float up and down the spine and use different areas. And I had to modify this. So if you're not into modifying your gear, you're going to have a heck of a time using a ferro rod. And a striker like this is an absolute game changer. So besides the fact that I'm going to get a fire going faster than you because I'm throwing off more sparks with my carbide striker, the safety aspect is overlooked way too often. So as a survival instructor, I've never seen any bad cuts. I see a lot of superficial cuts. So a lot of people are cutting their offhand most of the time. Most of the time it's just a Band-Aid cut. And anytime you have a sharp knife out, there's a potential for getting cut. So if you magnify that by being in an actual emergency, say you dunked your canoe and you're soaking wet and your hands are numb, or you fell through the ice and you need to make a fire, nothing's working quite right. The fact that you've got a sharp knife out that can make your problems a whole lot worse can't be overlooked. Besides the fact that for someone newer to ferro rods, this is just an added danger. This is something else you got to worry about. Anytime, especially when you have a group of new people out with knives, you got to be on alert. So a carbide striker like this, as sharp as this is against the ferro rod, it's safe to use. I've had this for several days now and I have not struck it because I wanted to show you how nice and cool it looks. I'm going to have to wear through this red coating before I can make a fire. And then as soon as I do that, I understand I have exposed this ferro rod to the elements. So probably the best situation would be to get one to practice with and one to use, and get a second one for your bug out bag, or get a third one for an emergency kit, and keep that one sealed up, ready to go till an emergency. Now I can't wait to strike this thing any longer. I've got a couple tender sources behind me, and let's make some fires. So my eyes aren't the best anymore, but the closer I looked at this, I do have monofilament. So I've got monofilament, I've got a fire ribbon, I believe this is a high temperature sewing thread, and then I have traditional paracord as well. So the Feuerstock's put out by Creek Stewart, and he does include a ferrocerium rod training course with that. So there's a link right to his course. You should probably check that out. You can always learn something when you're watching one of Creek's videos. So the first pull on this, I'm not expecting much. I have to wear through this red material before I get a spark. So, and the first one went through, the second one got me sparked. Nice. So the first one we're going to light, this is waxed jute. This was out of one of the old Apaca boxes, and jute makes a great bird's nest, and when you wax it, it just makes it weather resistant and burns even better. Let's see how it does. So I'm just going to pin this down. Awesome. So this next stuff's similar. This is actually Mama Jute. This was out of another Apaca box. So something like this, you could keep a chunk of this in a fire kit and just kind of break it up as needed. All right, so for this Mama Jute, I'm going to try to hold the striker stationary, and I'm going to pull back on the rod. So next I'm going to just use the carbide striker itself to go ahead and make some dust off of this piece of fat wood. Fat wood is pine with the resin impregnated into the wood itself. This is usually in the lower sections of a damaged tree, could be in a broken limb. It's in the roots sometimes. So this stuff's pretty available, and it makes a great fire in an emergency. So let's pull out some of the fire ribbon that is included in the lanyard, and we'll see how that works. So a little nest like this should go up pretty easy. So we'll see how it goes here. This is kind of fun, but we'll just do one more. This fire disc this was in the last Apoca box. So this was, a disc was included, as well as material to make your own, and then there's a course on how to make these. So I'm just going to actually take half of this. I was originally going to take half. I think I'm just going to get by with a quarter. So I'm going to put this back. And then these things fluff up pretty nice. You just going to want to expose as much fiber as you can. So I was excited when I got this, and this did not disappoint at all. This is a great ferro rod. I love the Carbide Striker. I love the high-vis color. Obviously, now that I've wore this, I've got to protect this area just like I would any other ferro rod. But for a bug out bag and emergency kit, a new one of these is going to be sitting there waiting to go until you're actually ready to use it. Till next time, this has been Jamie Boggs with Burning River Bushcraft. See you soon.